The mud does not care who you once were, officer or orphan, poet or butcher. It swallows your boots the same. The stink of rot and cordite fills your lungs, and somewhere beyond the wire, death hisses through the morning fog like a serpent unseen. The world has narrowed to a strip of earth, barely wide enough for your fear, and the weight of your rifle is nothing compared to the silence of the man beside you, the one who stopped breathing in the night. You press your cheek to the damp clay wall and wait. Wait for something. Anything. A letter, a whistle, an end. But dawn only brings the rats. If this story chills your soul or stirs your sleep, tell me, could you have endured the stench, the silence and the sorrow of that trench? Subscribe to walk further into the quiet corners of forgotten history. The frost crept in through the cracks in the wooden carriage walls, not with urgency but with a quiet, patient malice. It laced its fingers across the glass pane by your shoulder, drawing ghostly fern leaf patterns in the dim morning light. You press your forehead against the window, and the chill kisses your skin. Outside, the French countryside rolls by in silence. Fields half frozen, trees stripped of their pride, villagers dozing in the fog of a winter morning. Inside the train, the men breathe shallowly, not from fear, not yet, but from a heaviness they cannot name. Boots caked in old dirt rest beside polished ones. A boy in the corner cradles a letter in his hands like scripture. The engine roars steady and unwavering, pulling you all toward the front. And you are still a stranger to mud, to steel, to grief. But the earth ahead is waiting to make you its own. If this story chills your soul or stirs your sleep, tell me, could you have endured the frost of that journey? Subscribe if you'd like to wander further into the forgotten corners of human history. What would you have written in your last letter home, before stepping off that train? The carriage rocks gently with each turn of the track, and you feel the rhythm in your bones, like a heartbeat, but not your own. It's the sound of something greater, heavier, older, the beating of a world being dragged to war. You're not alone on this journey. 40 men to a car, packed shoulder to shoulder in wool and whispers. The air smells of smoke, wet wool, and something else. Something like metal and earth. A smell you won't understand until you've seen your first shell crater, until you've tasted the dirt of the front line with your teeth. Across from you, a boy with too much pink in his cheeks hums under his breath. The tune is cheerful, almost, in defiance of the cold. His name is Henry, and he carries a small loaf of rye bread wrapped in paper from his mother. You've seen him open it twice now, only to close it again without taking a bite, as if keeping it whole might preserve the memory of her hands. To your left, an older man reads a newspaper, not truly reading, just holding it. The paper trembles in his grip each time the train curves. You wonder what he's hiding beneath the headline. His name is Marcel, and his boots are worn smooth. He says he's been called back up, but he doesn't say from where. You imagine he's leaving a vineyard, a child, a lover, something tender he can't afford to speak of now. No one speaks of the war directly. Not yet. Instead, they talk around it of towns they've never visited, of cousins they haven't written, of food they miss, but wouldn't dare name aloud. You catch fragments of home wrapped in brittle laughter. My Margot makes lentils like no one else. Do you think they'll have decent tobacco where we're going? Maybe we'll be home by Easter. The sun climbs higher, but it doesn't warm. Instead, the light only sharpens the contrast. The white breath in the air, the pallor on the men's cheeks, the dull silver sheen of their canteens. You feel your hands stiffen in your gloves. They're new, a parting gift from your sister. She stitched your initials inside the cuff. Though the thread has already started to fray, hours pass. The train does not slow. Eventually the landscape begins to shift. Forests give way to open fields scarred with old trenches. The trees grow thinner, some standing like blackened matchsticks, burnt and barkless. The villages, when they appear, are missing pieces. A roof here, a wall there. In one, a dog chases a wheelbarrow. In another, a priest watches the train pass without moving his eyes from the tracks. You wonder if he's praying for you. And then, without warning, the engine screams. Not in alarm, but in arrival. The brakes hiss. The car jolts. Henry drops his bread. Silence fills the carriage. No one speaks as the train rolls to a halt. You hear birds outside. Strange, after hours of only the mechanical rhythm of the engine. They're loud. Too loud. The door slides open, and cold floods in. You step down from the train. The ground beneath your boots is not soil, but frozen mud. Brittle, uneven, already thick with footprints that don't belong to you. A thin mist hangs low, as if the air itself wishes to remain hidden. Beyond the station platform, if you can call it that, lies a town half-eaten by war. Windows like empty sockets, chimneys like broken fingers, trees stripped to the bone. And farther still beyond the town, beyond the shattered farmhouses and limp wire fences, the front, you can't see it, but you feel it. Like a weight at the base of your skull, like a scream waiting in your throat. An officer shouts names. Men gather their things. Some cross themselves. Others mutter jokes they don't believe in. You shoulder your pack. It's heavier now. You've arrived, though no one welcomes you. There are no banners, no songs, just the stink of oil, of gunpowder, of winter. You walk, past the dogs, past the boys who stopped humming, past the train that will not return. You do not yet know what awaits you. You've seen the rifles and the uniforms. Yes, you've imagined the charges, the banners, the medals, but you have not imagined the mud, the silence, the waiting, the way the earth itself will become your bed, your enemy, your home. You will learn. But for now, your boots crunch on frost-covered gravel, your breath fogs before you like ghostly banners. And somewhere ahead, a man you've never met has already dug a trench in your name. You walk toward it, toward the first freeze. The trench is not what you expected. It is not clean, nor straight, nor heroic. It is not the tight military lines sketched on maps or painted in books. It is a wound, raw, crooked, gaping, carved into the skin of a once-living field. You see it first from a hill, a long scar snaking through the mud, half swallowed by mist. It disappears into a grove of shattered trees, reappearing like a whisper among the ruins of old stone fences and collapsed barns. As you draw closer, the smell reaches you. It clings to the air like wet cloth, a stew of wet clay, rot kerosene and something sour, sweat maybe, or sickness. The ground sucks at your boots with every step, and you find yourself already leaning forward against the wind, as if bracing for something unseen. A corporal guides you in. No name, no welcome, just a nod and a grunt. He leads you past the entrance where two men are hunched beside a fireless brazier, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow. They glance at you without curiosity. New arrivals are just more bodies, fresh limbs for the old machine. The path down is narrow, dug by hand, reshaped by rain, trampled by 1,000 feet. You slide once and catch yourself on the shoulder of a man hauling a crate of biscuits. He doesn't curse, just keeps walking, eyes forward. The walls around you are lined with sandbags, torn, dripping, some sprouting weeds, others oozing mud from burst seams. At the bottom, the world tightens. The trench is barely shoulder wide in places, and the boards beneath your feet, if they exist at all, are slick and shifting. You smell something sweet and wrong, and glance down to see a rat the size of a cat pulling a scrap of cloth into a crevice. The cloth is red. You do not ask what it once covered. Move, someone mutters behind you, and you realize you've stopped walking. You press forward. You are shown your dugout. It is more of a dent than a room. Just a roof of corrugated iron, 4 walls of wood and clay, and a bunk stacked over another. The air inside is warmer but staler, as if it has been breathed and re-breathed by too many lungs. On the bottom bunk, a boy no older than 16 is asleep, or pretending to be. He coughs as you place your kit down, the sound dry and hollow. Name's Louis, someone says behind you. You turn. The man is tall, wiry, with a face that looks older than his years, lined by smoke, sleeplessness, and some memory you don't dare to ask about. He wears a tattered scarf that might once have been blue, and holds a cup of what he claims is coffee. You know it isn't. You'll get used to the smell, he says, nodding toward the dugout. Or you won't. Either way, we stop noticing. You try to smile. It doesn't quite form. Louis gestures toward the rest of the trench. Come. You follow him along the winding passage, stepping aside every few yards for men carrying ammunition, water, timber. The trench is a city, but one built underground, all elbows and edges, half swallowed by the earth. In the kitchen, a man stirs something over a portable stove, the steam mixing with cigarette smoke. At the latrine, a plank and a bucket are all that separate dignity from despair. You pass a telephone wire strung low to the ground, and overhead, nets of burlap and branches try and fail to hide the trench from the sky. The war is above you, beyond you, around you, but not here. Here is a strange kind of pause, waiting without end. Louis points toward the parapet. You'll stand there at dawn. That's when they come. Or don't. Either way, be ready. You nod. Not because you understand, but because it's all you can do. The sergeant finds you near sundown. He's a man of few words, with hands like stone and a voice like worn leather. His uniform is patched with mud and silence. He tells you when you'll be on watch, where to relieve yourself, how to clean your rifle with water that tastes like rust and sits in a metal drum. Then he walks away. You are left in the middle of the trench, unsure where to stand. Around you, the men had begun to disappear into their routines, checking boots, bandaging toes, muttering to themselves or to no one at all. Henry, the boy from the train, is here too. He has not spoken since your arrival. You see him trying to warm his hands over a candle stub that barely burns. The sun sinks low, and with it the world darkens into hues of iron and ash. The trench, already cold, begins to freeze in place. Every corner shadowed, every breath made visible. You hear distant artillery, far off, like gods coughing in the mountains. It reminds you that the war is not a story, it is a presence. You crouch beside your bunkmate, the coughing boy, and offer a tin of beans. He takes it without thanks, eats without looking. His name is Etienne, you learn later. He hasn't spoken in 2 days. The rats come out at night. You see one skitter across the floor dragging something shiny. No one moves to stop it. Later, as you lie in your bunk, staring at the wood slats above, you hear rain begin to fall. Not hard, just a steady drip, drip. You listen to it trickle through the roof, soaking into the corners, finding its way down the walls. In the dark it sounds almost like footsteps. You close your eyes. The trench is not a place. It is a sensation of pressure, of weight, of soil too close to your skin. You feel the earth pressing in on all sides, as if it means to bury you slowly, not out of malice, but indifferent. And in this moment, you understand something no one told you on the train. The enemy is not only out there, it is also here. Beneath your boots, in the air, in the quiet. You pull your coat tighter, and wait for morning. You do not remember when you saw the first one. Perhaps it was only a tail, flicking into the dark between sandbags, or a glint of black eyes beneath a wooden plank. Perhaps it was only the sound, soft and rhythmic, of claws skittering across mess tins or biscuit tins or bones. At first you thought it was your imagination, some trick of nerves sharpened by hunger and stillness. But by the second night, you were sure you were not alone in your trench. There were more eyes watching than men. The rats came before the bullets, before the shells, before the bayonet charges, before the screaming and the mud that clung to your ribs like grief. The rats were already there, fat, patient, clever, as if they knew the war better than you, as if they had made this place their cathedral. They moved in silence when they wished, and in laughter when they didn't. You could hear them gorging themselves in the dugouts, tearing at scraps of meat and cloth, climbing over boots and cheeks and knuckles without shame. They feasted when the moon was high, on crumbs, on candle wax, on paper, on men. Henry woke once with one chewing at his bootlaces. He didn't scream, just kicked, cursed and lit a match to watch it run. It didn't run. It stood still, flicking its whiskers, studying him. He stopped breathing, and only then, as the flame died, did it vanish. Etienne, the boy with the cough, whispered that they knew things, that they fed on the dead and the living, that once he saw one curled inside a man's open stomach, sleeping as if it belonged there. You didn't believe him. You didn't want to, but you didn't ask for more. The first one you saw up close was bold, larger than a loaf of bread, its back glossy with filth, its tail like a length of wet rope. It dragged a piece of biscuit from your rucksack as you watched, frozen. It looked at you once, unafraid, before slipping into the mud wall like a shadow. That night, you tied your rations to the ceiling beams with string. In the morning, they were gone, string and all. Louis, your trenchmate, said not to fight them. They've been here longer, he muttered, his voice flat as frost. They know the soil better than you. You asked him what that meant. He only looked away. Later, the sergeant handed you a small, rusted trap, and told you to keep it close. Use cheese if you have any, or nail polish. They like the smell. You didn't ask where he got nail polish in the trenches. You didn't want to know. On the fourth night, Etienne's coughing stopped. You thought perhaps he'd fallen asleep. But when you turned in your bunk, you saw his eyes open wide, mouth parted, breath caught somewhere between here and home. A rat, small, fast, scurried over his collarbone, and into the gap behind the crates. You said nothing, you simply lay there and watched. They had no fear of death, or perhaps they were born from it. You heard stories. A man in the next sector lost 2 fingers in the night, not to frostbite, but to nibbling teeth. They say he slept through it. They say he woke laughing. He doesn't laugh anymore. Some tried to kill them. You saw a young corporal smash one with a spade, sending blood and fur flying against the wall. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He stood there afterward, panting, holding the bloodied shovel like a sword. No one cheered. No one spoke. A minute later, another rat dragged the corpse away. They always came back. You began to sleep with your coat tucked into your socks. You wrapped a scarf around your face. You placed a tin cup by your side, hoping its clatter might wake you. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, and then one night, the coldest yet, you woke to warmth. It was not from a fire. There are no fires in the trenches. It was not from a hand or a body beside you. It was something softer, smaller. You opened your eyes to find it resting beneath your collarbone, nestled in the hollow of your chest like a child. Its breath was hot, its fur matted, its eyes shut. You did not move. You did not scream. You let it stay, because the wind outside was slicing through the cracks in the planks, and the rain had started again, soft, steady, endless, because your hands were too numb to strike, and your heart too tired to hate, because it was the first thing in days that had sought your warmth, not your silence. In the morning it was gone. You said nothing to the others, not even when you found a small muddy paw print on your scarf. You only pulled your coat tighter and returned to your post. Some men fought the rats. Some ignored them. Some feared them like omens. But you learned to live with them, because they were always there, before the trench, beneath it, inside. They were not a sign of the end. They were the beginning, and in the hollow hours between fire and frost, they kept you company, tiny witnesses to the slow unraveling of everything you once were. The rain did not fall, it whispered. It slipped through the air like a secret, so fine and ceaseless it became part of your breath. Not a storm, not a downpour, just a curtain of water, always falling, always speaking in a voice too soft to be heard, but too constant to be ignored. You felt it before you saw it, like a chill waking inside your coat. It crept in around your collar, down the curve of your spine, and into your boots, where it pooled like regret. This was not rain like you knew it, not the kind that fed crops or danced on rooftops. This was trench rain, thick with smoke and ash, born of skies that had forgotten how to be blue. It was a slow flood, invisible in its rise, sinking the earth an inch deeper with every hour. You had arrived dry. But now, no part of you was untouched. The walls of the trench began to weep, first at the corners, then in streaks, then all at once. Muddy rivulets carving new veins through the clay, dripping steadily into the duckboards below. The sandbags swelled, then sagged, then burst. Boards shifted, floors warped. Water gathered in your footprints and refused to leave. You dug channels to divert it, like the sergeant told you. It only returned. Each trench segment became a basin, a shallow grave for water and memory. The men moved slower now, shoulders hunched, caps soaked through. Woolen coats sagged with the weight of it all. Not just water, but waiting. Etienne's cough deepened. He clutched his chest at night like he was holding something in, something fragile and cracked. His breaths came wet and rattling, and when he slept it was with one eye half open, as if he feared drowning in dreams. One morning you found Louis scrubbing his toes with whiskey. "You'll lose them if you don't," he muttered, not looking up. You removed your boot. It peeled off like a second skin, slick and swollen. Your sock came with it, or what was left of it. Beneath, your foot was pale, wrinkled, and soft as dough. You pressed your thumb to the skin and watched the color vanish, then hesitate before returning. Louis nodded. "Change your socks twice a day?" If you can't at least take them off, let the air kiss them. That, or let the rats chew them off later. He handed you a rag, and for the first time you understood. The war was not only bullets and charges and fire, it was wet. It was rot. It was the slow, invisible disassembly of the body, the betrayal of your own skin. By the second week, the trench had grown narrower. The walls leaned in. The roof dripped. You began to dream in dampness of blankets soaked in rain, of your mother's voice muffled by water. Letters you tried to write turned soft before you finished them. Ink smeared, paper tore. You gave up trying. Instead, you whispered into the night, into the rain. "Just so you see," you said, "I am here." And the rain replied, "I know." One evening, Etienne didn't wake. His lips were blue. His breath came faintly like wind through reeds. You called for the medic, who came with his oilskin bag and his sunken eyes. He unwrapped Etienne's foot. You turned away, but you still saw it. In the dark behind your eyes, you saw the blackened toes, curled and stiff, as if frozen mid-scream, skin sloughing away like wet paper, bone visible. The smell of infection sweet and foul, like spoiled fruit and old iron. The medic lit a cigarette and didn't smoke it. He just held it in his teeth and said, "He needs to be carried out." But the path behind the trench had flooded. The duckboards had snapped. The stretcher-bearers had 3 others to retrieve first. Fierce, Etienne would have to wait. He didn't complain. He only looked at you. And in that gaze, you saw the question, not spoken aloud, not even shaped into words, but there, deep and quiet and unanswerable, "Will it happen to me next?" You had no reply. You sat beside him that night and held his hand, not for comfort, but so he would know that someone knew he was still alive. And as you sat there, the rain continued, brushing against the roof, pattering against tin, soaking the last dry corners of the trench. It did not rage. It did not thunder. It whispered of home, of cellars filled with apples and salt, of dry sheets and warm bread, of firelight, of boots left drying by the door. You closed your eyes and let it speak, because sometimes in the trenches, it was not the scream that broke you, but the whisper. And in the hours before dawn, when the world was made of mud and mist and memory, that whisper was the only thing left that still knew your name. You write your first letter on your 3rd Sunday in the trench, using a stub of pencil and the back of an empty ration card. You write to your mother, though the words come slowly, as if dredged from mud. You want to tell her you're safe, though you are not. You want to say you are warm, though you are not. You want to say the men are kind, that you laugh sometimes, that it isn't as bad as she feared, but all of that would be a lie. So instead, you describe the weather, the rain, the way it smells, the rats, how they grow fat on the dead. You mention Henry, who still carries the crust of bread from his mother, but has not dared to eat it. You tell her the nights are loud with distant shell fire, and louder still in the silences between. You finish the letter with your name, not the way she says it, but the way they say it here, clipped and military. You fold it twice, press it to your lips, and hand it to the runner. He doesn't ask what's inside. That night, a storm shakes the trench. Thunder walks overhead like a god in heavy boots, and the rain comes harder than before. You lie awake with your coat pulled over your head, listening to the walls weep. When the morning comes, the candle has drowned, and Etienne is gone. Not dead, just gone. Evacuated in the night, they say. Taken down the back path on a stretcher. One boot missing. His face covered with a scarf. You do not see him again. You write a second letter. This one to your brother. You tell him nothing important. Only that you miss his bad singing. That you hope the dog is still alive. That you sometimes dream of the vineyard in summer when the air smelled of peaches and dust. This time you draw a tiny map in the corner. A child's sketch of the trench. Crooked lines with labels. Mud, rats, Henry, ghost tree, home. You smile as you seal it, though the smile feels like it belongs to someone else. You do not write again for a while. Days stretch into weeks. Men leave and do not return. The post is late, always late. Some say it was shelled. Some say the runners were shot. Some say the bags were lost in the flood. The trench grows quieter. Henry stops humming. You begin speaking your letters instead. At night, beneath your breath, just loud enough for the rats to hear. Dear Mama, You whisper. It's cold today. Louis says it's going to snow, but I think it's just fog. A man near Sector D froze to death last night. They didn't find him until his boots turned white. You close your eyes and continue. I miss your bread. I miss the way you used to wrap my scarf too tight, then unwrap it to kiss my neck. You speak as though she is listening, as though your words might slip into the cracks in the wall and ride the wind home. Some men stop writing altogether. They say it doesn't matter, that no one is reading, that no one is left. Others keep writing, obsessively, pages and pages, folded carefully into envelopes that never leave the trench. One man keeps his inside his helmet, another pins his to the inside of his coat like a shield. You begin to understand, the letters aren't for them. They're for you, for the person you were, or might become again, if the war ever lets you return. The sergeant finds a letter tucked into a crack in the dugout wall. It's water-stained, the ink smeared into ghostly curves. He reads it aloud by candlelight, his voice low, almost reverent. It's a love letter. Not to a woman, but to a town. To cobbled streets, and bakery smoke, and the sound of bells in the rain. The man who wrote it died 2 days ago. You learn. Shot while pissing into a ditch. The sergeant folds the letter carefully and slides it into his pocket. Send it, he said. No one asks who to. Later that night, you dream of your mother's handwriting. You see her loops and flourishes, the way she dots her eyes with tiny hearts when she's not thinking. You imagine a letter waiting on your pillow, its paper warm with the scent of home. When you wake, your hands are damp with sweat, your breath shallow. There is no letter. The post has not come. The trench is unchanged. And still, you whisper, as you eat your morning biscuit. You whisper as you scrub your socks with cold water. You whisper as you patch the wall where the wind has begun to howl through. Dear Mama, it rained again last night. Dear Mama, I heard a bird today. Just one. Dear Mama, I'm still here. And though the rain steals your words and the wind carries them into silence, you keep speaking, because some part of you believes no needs to believe that they are being heard, even if only by the rats, even if only by the ghosts, even if the letters never come. You did not know his name at first. He was already there when you arrived, older, thinner, quieter than the others. He kept mostly to himself, occupying a narrow space in the corner of the dugout, where the wooden beams sagged from water and age. He slept with his back to the wall, boots always on, his overcoat wrapped tightly around him like the last embrace of a distant lover. He spoke only when necessary, ate sparingly, cleaned his rifle with reverence, like a ritual handed down through generations. You knew little about him, only that he had survived longer than most, and that he sang in his sleep, not loudly, not with bravado, but softly, like a lullaby hummed for someone no longer present. The first time you heard it, you thought it was the wind, brushing over the top of the trench in a moment of uncharacteristic grace. But the tune had shape, form. It carried words, though the syllables blurred into one another, a language just out of reach. Louis said he sang of the Loire, old river songs, he whispered, his breath curling in the damp air. Songs they used to sing on barges, or at weddings, or funeral. That night, the singing returned. You lay still, eyes open, listening. The voice was worn thin by time and smoke, but steady. Each note fell like a drop into still water, sending ripples through the hush of the trench. No one interrupted him. No one dared. Even the rats paused. It became a kind of anchor. In the nights that followed, his song marked the turning of time, better than any watch. It arrived between 2 and 3, always, and never lasted long. Just a few bars, enough to remind you that somewhere beyond the mud and smoke, music still existed, that once, a man could sing of something other than loss. One morning he shared a piece of bread with you. Stale and crumbling, it had clearly been hoarded. A treasure. He handed it to you, wordlessly, eyes still half-lidded from sleep. You took it with a nod. It was the best thing you'd tasted in weeks, not because of its flavour, but because of what it cost him to give. You tried to thank him. He only shook his head. Pas nécessaire, he murmured. Not necessary. The next night, the shelling began again. Not close, not yet, but close enough to rattle the walls, to send spoons clattering and men into silence. You huddled deeper into your coat, watching the candle flicker as dust fell from the ceiling in tiny silent avalanches. He sang through it. The same melody, only quieter now. Almost as though he was singing not to you, not to the men, not even to himself, but to the mud, the air, the war itself, as if daring it to remember beauty. You tried to hum along, but your voice caught in your throat, unused to softness. The singing stopped 3 nights later. Not all at once, just never returned. At first you thought he was simply tired, that perhaps the night was too cold, the air too damp. But in the morning, when Louis bent to rouse him for watch duty, he did not stir. There was no blood, no wound, just stillness. His eyes were closed, his hands folded over his chest as if in prayer. His rifle leaned beside him, untouched. The tin cup near his boots had collected a thin film of dust and rain. No one cried. No one spoke. They carried him to the edge of the trench in silence. There were no stretchers left, so they used an old wooden crate. You helped lower him into the hole. Shallow, hastily dug, barely wide enough to hold the memory of a man. Someone placed his coat over him. Someone else recited a psalm. No one knew if he believed, but it felt wrong not to say something. The shovel passed from hand to hand. You took your turn, moving the mud gently, as if it might bruise. The final gesture was yours. From your coat pocket, you drew a spoon, dented, scratched, engraved with a single letter, and laid it beside him. You did not know if it was his. It didn't matter. He had sung to you. He had given you bread. He had reminded you, even for a moment, what it meant to be human in a place that sought to erase all trace of it. That night, the trench was unbearably quiet. You could hear the breathing of men, the dripping of water, the shifting of rats in the beams, but not the song. And so, you sang it, badly, off-key, half-remembered, but you sang it all the same. A lullaby for the nameless, a river song for a man who died without ceremony. You sang it once, then stopped. The men said nothing, but no one slept alone that night. It started like a murmur beneath the earth, a low vibration, barely there, a shudder that passed through your boots before it reached your ears, then silence. The kind that pulls every breath from your chest and holds it still, as if the air itself were bracing for something unspeakable. The men sensed it. You saw it in the way Louis paused mid-step, in the way Henry's eyes flicked toward the sky, in the way your own hands stopped moving, suspended over your half-fastened coat. And then the earth screamed, not in a voice, but in violence. The shell struck like a god's fist, not near, not far, just close enough to steal the horizon. You felt your legs leave the ground, your body flung sideways through the air like a marionette with its strings cut. Sound disappeared. Light disappeared. The world became a single color, brown, thick, consuming, mud, sky, wood, blood, all smeared into one motionless blur. When you opened your eyes, the trench was gone, not destroyed, erased. You blinked through the smoke, ears ringing like the aftermath of a cathedral bell. Your mouth tasted of soil and iron. You tried to rise, but found your hands submerged. The floor had become a lake of slurry, waist-deep in places, littered with splintered planks and shreds of canvas. A man screamed. But it wasn't pain. It was confusion, pure, raw confusion, the kind a child makes when his world breaks. He stood on a mound of dirt that hadn't existed minutes before, arms outstretched, face slack. He turned in a circle, calling a name no one recognized. Then he fell silent, crumpling in place like a marionette finally left alone. You looked up and saw that the sky was missing. Not cloudy missing. The explosion had lifted the air itself, turned the ceiling of your world into smoke and ash. Where once there were birds and sun and wire, there was now only drift-blackened paper floating down like scorched snow. It twisted gently, peacefully, as if mocking the chaos below. Louis found you crawling toward the dugout, your left boot lost, your coat torn along the spine. He grabbed your collar and dragged you through the muck, grunting with each step. You remember his breath, not the sound of it, but the smell. Tobacco, old onions, something metallic. He didn't ask if you were hurt. He asked if you were still whole. You nodded, though you weren't sure. The dugout was half collapsed. One side caved in, the other smoking. Henry sat inside, staring at a crushed lantern. Blood ran down his forehead, thin and precise as a line drawn in ink. He blinked slowly, over and over, like a man trying to erase a dream he couldn't stop dreaming. Someone cried for help. Not a scream, but a whisper. You followed the sound to a pile of timber near the latrine. A hand protruded from the wreckage. Fingers twitching, you pulled until they stopped. The man beneath was already gone, but his hand held something, a strip of photograph, water-warped, faces smudged. You kept it, not out of sentiment, but because you needed to prove to yourself that something had survived. The medics arrived late, too late. They moved like ghosts, their coats smeared with mud and grief. They asked no questions, made no promises, just wrapped the bodies, tagged the living, and left. By dusk, the trench had been reshaped. The crater still smoked. The men still worked. There was no ceremony, no reprieve, only the slow stitching of earth and man back into something that looked like war. You sat beside Louis at the parapet. He lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, coughed, then offered you one. You declined. He nodded. "We lose the sky every time," he said, watching the smoke curl upward. You didn't understand. He pointed toward the heavens. Now, dim, bruised, dotted with ash. Every time the shell falls, the sky disappears. Not just the clouds, the sky, like it's been taken from us. You looked up. He was right. There was no depth above you. No stars, just a veil, a ceiling, a place where nothing lived. "What do we do when it doesn't come back?" he asked. Not looking at you, you said nothing, because the answer had already begun to form in your bones. That night, you slept with your coat pulled over your face. Not to keep warm, but to pretend, to imagine, even for a moment, that the sky was still there, that behind the black and the fire, there was still something soft, blue, open. But even in dreams, all you saw were drifting pages, ashes falling like snow, and the hand that wouldn't let go. You saw her first through smoke, a shape at the edge of the trench, moving against the grey, not quickly, not urgently, just steadily, like someone used to walking toward pain. Her coat was long, darker than the mud, her face half covered by a scarf. She carried a satchel slung over one shoulder and a roll of linen under her arm. No rifle, no helmet, just hands, bare and red with cold. She did not speak when she arrived, only nodded to the sergeant, who stepped aside without a word. In a place where everyone barked and shouted, her silence was louder than any command. She knelt beside the first wounded man, a boy with shrapnel in his thigh and eyes too wide to blink, and without preamble she began to work. You watched from a few paces away, half hidden behind a sandbag wall. The smoke from the morning barrage still drifted lazily across the trench, carrying the metallic tang of ash and blood. She moved calmly, fingers wrapping gauze with the precision of ritual, not a trace of panic, not even in her breath. You could not remember the last time you'd seen a woman, not in flesh and shadow, but here, real, warm, present. The wounded boy moaned once. She pressed his hand and whispered something you couldn't hear. The moan stopped. Louis leaned close to you and murmured, "Nightingale." You didn't understand. "She's from the hospital behind the ridge. They send them when they have too many for stretchers. She'll be gone by nightfall." You nodded, but your eyes stayed fixed. There was no music in the trench. No colour, no softness. The rats had eaten the lace off Henry's collar. The mud had swallowed the charm Etienne wore on his bootlace. The wind had stripped the sky of its hue. But here was something different. Her hair was the colour of damp wheat. Her coat smelled faintly of lavender and iodine. When she leaned over the injured, the air changed. You saw her mouth a prayer once, when she thought no one watched. It was not for herself. You wanted to speak to her, but your tongue felt too large, too clumsy, and the words you remembered from before the war had long since sunk beneath the mire. Instead, you carried water to her, unasked. She took it with a nod that brushed past your skin like wind through tall grass. Later, you watched her wrap a man's ribs. He'd been caught by falling timber during the shelling. His breath came wet and sharp. She worked fast, binding his chest, pausing only to hold his shoulder as he trembled. "Name?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. She asked again, more gently. Still nothing. She looked up at the sergeant. He shrugged. "No name then," she murmured, tying the last knot. When she rose to leave, the trench seemed to exhale. Not relief, not ease, Just a momentary lifting, as though the mud, the boards, even the rats had paused in her presence. She walked past you without looking, boots silent on the soaked ground. Her coat trailed behind her like the end of a song. You wanted to ask her to stay, not for you, for the trench, for the silence, for the sky. But you said nothing. Instead, you followed her with your eyes, watching as she climbed out, slipping over the rim and into the mist beyond. Her figure vanished slowly, like a memory being taken back. She did not return. That night, the men said little. No jokes, no cards, just the usual movements. Boots off, rifles checked, cigarettes lit with shaking hands. But the quiet was different. Less hollow, as if something had been left behind in the dugout. Not a sound, not a scent, but a trace, a kindness not yet devoured by the war. You lay in your bunk and tried to remember your mother's voice. You couldn't, but you remembered her hands, how they folded laundry, how they tied knots in fishing line, how they brushed your cheek when you were too sick to speak. You dreamt of lavender, of linen fluttering in a windless room, of a woman walking into the dark without fear. When you woke, the air smelled of mud and smoke again, but beneath it, barely there, a whisper of something cleaner. The wound had not healed, but for one day, it had been seen. You do not know what day it is when the whisper starts. It comes from the far end of the trench, near the forward listening post. A humming at first, low, broken, and uncertain, like a man trying to remember the taste of something long forgotten. You pause, biscuit halfway to your mouth, listening as the melody shapes itself through the cold. Doze nuit, Saint nuit, Henry. His voice cracks on the second line, soft as wool soaked in rain. But the tune persists, a Christmas carol, of all things, sung to mud and silence and frost-bitten fingers. No one joins at first. The trench is too long, too cold, too full of ghosts. But then, from somewhere near the latrine trench, another voice picks it up. Dans les cieux, l'astre Louis. Louis mutters a curse, but he doesn't stop them. You do not sing, not yet, but the words arrive anyway. You mouth them behind cracked lips, feeling the shape of them in your breath. They do not taste like victory. They taste like wine once shared in a sunlit room, like famine, like faith. Not in gods or nations, but in the memory that warmth once existed. The carol ripples through the trench, like a wind that dares to be kind. Men stop moving. Even the rats pause. You hear a clatter in the next bay. Someone has dropped their enamel cup. Then silence again, until faint, barely audible, from the other side of no man's land comes the echo. Still Nacht, Heilige Nacht, German. You freeze. It is not a trick, not a shout or a ruse, or some cruel joke meant to draw fire. It is singing, gentle, almost bashful, a verse you don't understand, but the tune is unmistakable, the same carol, carried over the torn earth between you. No one speaks. You glance at Louis. He says nothing, just smokes, eyes narrowed toward the parapet, as if trying to see through the fog. Henry stands, slowly, as if lifted by some unseen hand. He climbs the fire step and peers over the edge. A whistle should blow, a shot should ring, but none does. The sky is quiet. The guns are quiet, and for the first time in weeks, you hear only voices. By midday, someone has hung a tin cup on a bayonet. It reflects what little sun breaks through the clouds. A signal, a truce without words. No orders are given, no documents signed, only nods, only silence, only song. The sergeant allows it, or at least does not stop it. That's enough. You pull out your last cigarette, the one you'd been saving for a letter that never arrived, and you offer it to Louis. He lights it with shaking fingers and passes it back. You don't smoke, but you take a drag anyway. The warmth stings. In the afternoon, a few brave souls climb out, not fully, just half raised, hands up, eyes wide. One of them carries chocolate, another, a small bottle of schnapps. You watch from the edge of the trench, heart clanging like a bell inside your ribs. No shots, no screams, just boots squelching into mud, voices raised not in anger, but curiosity. You do not join them, you stay below. Not from fear, but from reverence. This moment, this impossible stillness, is too fragile to touch. You are afraid to break it. Someone passes you a sliver of tinned peach. You haven't tasted fruit in weeks. You close your eyes as it melts on your tongue. By evening the carols have faded. The men return to their sides. No promises were made. Nothing written down. But the world feels slightly less broken. You light a match to warm your fingers. Just one. Its glow flares soft against the wood of the dugout wall. You hold it there, letting it burn down to your fingertips before it dies. You do not have a candle. You do not have a tree. You have this, the memory of a voice, the ghost of a tune, and the knowledge, fleeting, tender, that for one day the war forgot itself. You fall asleep to silence, real silence, not the kind that waits for gunfire, but the kind that follows a lullaby. You wake with your foot on fire, not from flames. There is no heat in the trench, not even the kind of warmth that comes from breath or friction or dreams. This fire is colder, deeper. It crawls up from the soles of your feet like frost with teeth. You sit up, light-headed, and fumble for your boot. The lace is frozen stiff, crusted with a film of mud and yesterday's rain. You tug. The pain is immediate, sharp as glass. Your breath catches in your throat as the boot begins to yield. You brace yourself and pull again. The leather peels away like scab skin, thick with damp. Inside, the sock clings like moss. When you finally strip it off, your foot is mottled white and grey, the toes swollen and slick. You touch the arch, the skin gives, then stays pressed, an indentation that lingers like a bruise on fruit. You press again. It doesn't bounce back. Louis crouches beside you and says nothing. He takes your foot in his hands and begins to rub. Hard. You wince. He doesn't stop. You wait any longer, he mutters, and they'll cut it off with a spoon. You want to laugh, but you don't, because it doesn't feel like a joke. That day, you don't walk. You shuffle. You stamp. You hop from plank to plank, testing the pressure like a man stepping on thin ice. Each time your heel touches the ground, a spark shoots through your calf, bright and hot and terrifying. The medic sees it, nods grimly, and hands you a bottle of iodine and a strip of gauze. Keep it clean, he says. Keep it dry. You glance at the sky. It begins to rain. Henry helps you wrap it later, his hands trembling. He sings to himself under his breath. Not a carol now, just a wandering tune with no clear rhythm. His eyes don't meet yours, but his grip is steady. That night, you can't sleep. The pain has changed. No longer sharp, but deep. A throb that pulses with each heartbeat, as if your foot were trying to remind you it's still there, still suffering. You remove the bandage, peel it back slowly. One of your toes is turning blue. You whisper a prayer, not for healing, just for time. The trench does not stop for you. You are still expected to stand watch, to haul crates, to shovel out the latrine when the water rises. You do what you can. Louis covers for you when he's able. Others pretend not to notice. But the trench notices. The mud finds the weakest parts of a man. It creeps into the cracks. You begin to limp. The limp becomes a stagger. One morning, you fall. Not far, just from the fire step to the duckboard below. But it feels like a fall from a great height. The impact sends a shock through your leg, and you cry out before you can stop yourself. The others glance over, then away. That's when the shame arrives. Heavier than your rifle. Heavier than the weight of the sodden coat on your back. You are no longer just a body in the line. You are a burden, a delay, a man who needs help in a place where help is a scarce and sacred thing. You begin to fake it. You slap your leg before patrols. You smile too wide. You say it's nothing, even as your foot swells, even as the pain climbs like ivy toward your knee. One night, the rats crawl over your legs and you do not move. Not because you are brave, but because you cannot. In the morning, Louis forces you to sit. He removes your boot. The sock beneath is black with rot. He curses, then holds your foot up to the rising light. You see it then, the red line. A thin streak beginning at the base of your toe, creeping upward like a vine painted in blood. Infection, you know what it means. You've seen it before. 3 men in your unit have vanished this way. Carried off on stretchers or dragged behind supply carts, never to return. One of them screamed until they sedated him. Another begged them to take the other foot instead. You do not scream. You just close your eyes. And in that dark, You remember a path in your village. Cobbled, uneven, sunlit. You remember running barefoot across it, as a child, a cherry clenched in your fist, laughing. You remember your mother's voice calling you back. You remember the warmth of the stone under your feet. You press your hand to your calf, feel the heat radiating upward. Later that day, the medic writes your name on a slate and ties a piece of cloth around your sleeve. You are marked. A stretcher will come. Eventually. Until then, you sit by the wall of the trench, watching the water drip from the sandbags. You think of toes, of fire, of cobblestones. You do not pray this time. You only wait. And in the stillness between the pain, you wonder, if they take your foot, how much of you will remain? It happens in the morning, just after the sun decides to rise, not golden and proud, but pale. A tired eye behind a veil of mist. A shell lands beyond the trench, somewhere behind the line, where barns lean like old men and farmhouses still remember laughter. You feel the tremor beneath your boots, hear the sigh of dust collapsing into itself. Not close, but close enough. The sergeant sends you and Louis to investigate. Might have hit the supply cart, he says. Or the farmhouse near the well. You limp as you walk, your bandaged foot hot with protest, but Louis says nothing. He simply matches your pace. The mud thins as you leave the trench. The air changes too, less heavy, less sour. You step over fallen wire and past shattered fences, boots crunching frost-laced grass instead of duckboards. A silence hums between you, not the usual silence of dread, but a hollow, waiting kind. The farmhouse appears slowly through the fog, or what's left of it. The roof is gone. One wall hangs at an angle, timbers exposed like ribs. Smoke rises in faint spirals from a broken stove. A wheelbarrow lies overturned, its contents hay, rags, pieces of cloth, scattered like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Louis enters first. He calls out in French, then in German. No answer. You follow him, stepping over the threshold, ducking under a splintered beam. The inside smells of plaster and soot. A kettle still rests on the stove, blackened but upright. A table lies sideways, its legs twisted. A doll's hand, porcelain, dirt-smudged, pokes from beneath a collapsed shelf. You move closer. There's a ribbon beside it. Red, bright, almost impossibly so. Not a scrap of uniform, not a rag of signal cloth. A bow, perfectly tied, as if placed with care. Your chest tightens. Louis calls again, louder this time. A whimper answers. Not a word, just a sound. Fragile. You freeze, then follow it, past the crumbled hearth, beneath a cracked lintel, into what must have been a sleeping room. The floor here is covered in rubble. The beam has fallen diagonally, resting against the far wall. Dust hangs in the air like ash. Beneath it, curled in the corner, is the child. A girl, no older than 6. She wears a wool dress smudged with dirt, a cardigan with wooden buttons. Her knees are scraped. Her hair is tangled. But the ribbon, that impossibly red ribbon, is still neatly tied at the base of her braid. You kneel slowly, hands open, palms up. She does not cry. She does not speak. She just looks at you, eyes wide, unblinking, the color of frozen earth. Her lips tremble. Her fingers clench around the broken arm of the doll. Louis kneels beside you. She's not hurt, he says, barely above a whisper. Just shock. You nod, throat too tight to answer. Together, you lift the beam, carefully, slowly. You make space. Louis reaches in, his hands steady, and lifts her. She's light, frighteningly so, and doesn't resist. You wrap your coat around her. She leans into your chest without a word. The return to the trench feels longer. The frost has melted into a slick sheen. Your foot throbs with each step, but you ignore it. The girl rests against you like silence made flesh. You do not speak to her. You just carry her. When you arrive, the sergeant takes one look and orders her back with the medics. They argue. It's not their job, they say, but he shouts and they yield. You place the girl on a stretcher. She does not let go of your coat. A medic pries her hands loose. She whimpers. Then she's gone. Carried down the line, past crates and carts, past men too tired to ask questions. Her red ribbon disappears into the mist. That night, the trench is quiet. No one speaks of the girl. Louis sharpens his knife by lantern light. Henry patches a tear in his sock with black thread. You sit in the dugout, your foot elevated, the pain now dull and constant, but you don't feel it. You hold the porcelain hand in your palm. You had taken it from the rubble, not for souvenir but for proof that something delicate had survived the blast. Something innocent. Later, when you finally sleep, you dream of your sister. She's younger than the girl, with hair like straw and freckles across her nose. In the dream, she runs across the orchard, trailing a ribbon behind her, red, just like the girl's. You try to call out to her, but your mouth is full of smoke, and she fades into the mist, smiling. It begins slowly, as most unravelings do. At first, it's a misplaced word, a name repeated too often, a man looking for his boots while they're already on his feet. Laughter where there should be none. Silence where there should be cries. You tell yourself it's fatigue, the toll of sleeplessness and damp. You want to believe the mind bends, but never breaks. Then one night, a man calls you by a name that isn't yours. You correct him gently. He blinks, smiles, apologizes. But the next morning, he calls you by that name again. This time, you do not correct him. You just nod. His name is Marcel. Or perhaps it was once. He is not old, 30, maybe. But his hair is greying, his shoulders always drawn inward. He used to keep a photograph in his pocket. A woman holding a baby, the edges worn soft from finger and thumb. One day you see him staring at it, and he whispers, "Who are they?" No one answers. Louis watches from across the dugout, his expression unreadable. "He's fading," he mutters. Like smoke. More men begin to slip. One of the cooks starts repeating the same sentence at dinner. Salt brings out the meat, over and over, even when there is no meat, even when no one is listening. A sentry forgets which way to face during night watch. Another starts digging near the latrine, insisting he's building a chapel. He hums while he works, tuneless and relentless. You tell the sergeant. He shrugs. "They'll last until they don't," he says. "Then we send them back. If there's a back to send them to." You try not to watch Marcel too closely, but it's hard. He follows you sometimes. Stays near during watch, mimics your movements. Once, he hands you your own helmet, smiling proudly as if returning a lost treasure. You thank him. You do not say that was never yours to take. Then, one afternoon, he carves your name into the wall of the dugout. Not your full name, just your first, over and over, 20 times. You run your fingers across the scratches, the grooves raw and deep, the wood splinters beneath your touch. You feel something tighten in your chest. Not fear, exactly, something softer, more aching. He's not mocking you. He's trying to remember, trying to hold on. That night, you hear him whispering to himself in the corner. Keep the boots dry. Watch for frostbite. Send letters on Thursdays. His voice trembles. You say nothing, because you've done it too. Whispered instructions in the dark to stop your mind from unraveling. Rules, rituals, anything that makes the world stay still for a moment longer. The next morning, he doesn't show for roll call. You find him slumped in the communication trench, hands buried in the mud. He is alive, but his eyes are vacant. When you kneel beside him and speak his name, he flinches. Then he whispers, "Don't take me, please." You don't know what he means. Later that day, during a brief exchange of fire, a shell bursts near the southern post. Shrapnel arcs through the air like sparks from a dying fire. When the smoke clears, you see him, lying face down, arms splayed. You rush to him, screaming his name. The one he gave you, the one you'd started to answer to. But he is already gone. The medic checks for a pulse, shakes his head. You sit beside him until the light fades. And in the quiet that follows, a strange thought takes hold. Perhaps he didn't forget his name. Perhaps he gave it to you, passed it on, like a coat, or a song, or a story no one else would remember. Perhaps he saw in you the man he once was, the last shape he could still hold before the mud claimed him. And now, in a way neither of you asked for, you carry two names, yours and his. You scratch them side by side into the same plank he carved, just once, just deep enough, because someone should know he was here, even if only you. He arrived in the grey hush before dawn, when the fog curled low over the trench like a blanket pulled tight over a restless child. A fresh uniform, boots without cracks, face still flushed with the confidence of someone who believed the war was something you could prepare for. He carried a pack too full, a rifle too clean, and in the breast pocket of his coat, just visible when the wind shifted, a silver spoon. You noticed it at once. Polished, ornate, out of place in a world where most men ate with rusted tin forks or their fingers. It glinted when he moved, catching what little light the sky allowed. Louis saw it too. "Family crest," he muttered, spitting into the mud. Rich boys always bring something shiny. Something to remember who they were in case they forget. The boy didn't introduce himself, but he smiled. Often. Nervously, like someone who didn't know what to do with his hands. He was assigned to the Western Bay, just 2 trenches down from yours. Not far. You passed him each morning as he checked his rifle, standing straight, shoulders square, eyes scanning the horizon, like a child playing soldier in a field of wildflowers. The sergeant called him Jules. You never asked if that was his real name. One morning, during your patrol, you found him sitting by the fire step, spoon in hand, turning it over and over as if it might whisper secrets. He looked up, startled. "It was my father's," he said. You said nothing. He carried it in 1870, against the Prussians. Said it saved his life. He kept it in his breast pocket. The metal deflected a bullet, just barely. You looked at the spoon. Its edge was smooth, its bowl shallow, from use. You asked, finally, why he brought it. He shrugged. "I thought, maybe it would work again." The sky broke open that night. Shells fell like thunder on the ridgeline, rattling the trench walls, turning breath into fog and prayer. Men screamed without knowing they screamed. You lay flat, cheek pressed into the mud, heart thudding like boots on cathedral floors. Somewhere, a crate exploded. The rats vanished. Even the wind held its breath. When morning came, the sky was low and sullen, and silence returned like a wound. You were sent to collect the wounded. Bodies lay like laundry flung across a ravaged field. Some twitched, some moaned, some stared, eyes wide, mouths open to a sky that gave no answers. You found Jules near a collapsed sandbag wall, half buried, one boot missing. His eyes were open, but they did not see. You reached for his pulse. Nothing. There was no blood, just stillness. The medic tagged him, then moved on. You stayed a moment longer. His coat had been torn at the chest, and the pocket where the spoon had lived was empty. Later, when you returned to the trench, you found it, not in his coat, not in his pack, in the mud, bent. The spoon had folded like paper, the handle curled inward as if trying to protect itself. You washed it in a basin of grey water, scrubbing gently with your sleeve until the crest reappeared. A lion rampant, paw raised, teeth bared. You turned it in your hand, and kept it. You told no one. That night, you lay in your bunk, the spoon wrapped in cloth, hidden beneath your tunic. You didn't know why you kept it. Only that letting it vanish into the trench would have felt like a second death. You dreamed of your father, not the man who raised you, but the man he might have been. Young, uniformed, sitting at a campfire with a spoon in his hand, writing a letter that would never be sent. In the morning, you checked your coat pocket 3 times before breakfast. The spoon was still there. And for reasons you couldn't name, you felt stronger, not braver, just anchored. Somewhere beneath the blood and the cold, something had passed between you and the boy with the clean rifle and the nervous smile. A reminder that things, even small things, survive. Even in mud. Even in war. The snow melts slowly, without ceremony. It does not vanish in joy or celebration, but recedes like shame, inch by inch, leaving behind a world not renewed but ruined. The frost that once held the trench firm begins to bleed into the earth, turning walls into slough, duckboards into islands, and the floor into something deeper than mud, something alive, ravenous, and endless. The thaw does not bring comfort. It brings collapse. Sandbags sag under their own weight, their contents spilling like guts. The walls slump inward, shedding stones and beams. What once held its shape now slithers sideways, becoming part of the slow descent into the belly of the land. You wake one morning to find the rear wall of the dugout caved in, your kit half swallowed by the sludge. You dig it out with your hands. Everyone does. Shovels are useless in this kind of mud. It sticks, It pulls, it refuses to be moved. You learn to walk with care, each step chosen like a chess move, each boot lifted with effort. Men fall, some sink. Once a corporal vanishes to the knee, and it takes 3 men to pull him out. It rains again. Not the winter's cold drizzle, but the slow, soaking fall of spring, warm enough to trick you into hope, relentless enough to drown it. With the thaw comes the rot. Old corpses, once buried in frozen earth, rise again. Not whole, not visible, but present. A shoulder blade here, a clump of hair there, a boot with a foot still inside. The trench no longer hides its dead, it exhales them. The rats return in greater numbers, sleek and confident. The stench of their feast travels with the wind. Still, you breathe it in, because with the rot also comes sound, birdsong. At first you think it a trick, a shell whistling wrong, but then, again, a clear, tremulous chirp from the tree line, so thin and clean it makes your throat ache. A bird, real, alive. You glance up, and there it is, perched on a broken post, feathers ruffled, head cocked. Henry cries when he hears it. Not loudly, just a single, sharp inhale. The sound cuts through the trench like light through smoke. That evening, the men speak in low tones. Not about the bird, no one dares, but about home, about spring in the real world. Louis speaks of plum trees that bloom behind his family's bakery. Another man from Alsace describes fields full of cowslips and poppies. You close your eyes and picture your mother's garden, the way the air smelled of mint and damp stone. You open them again. The trench remains, but something has shifted. The sky is no longer iron, the clouds no longer silent. Once the world was colourless, a painting soaked in grey. Now faint streaks of blue begin to return. Not many, but enough. You still freeze at the sound of artillery, still flinch at sudden footsteps, still wake with your heart thundering against your ribs. But now, when you stand at the edge of the trench and look past the barbed wire, past the shell-pocked field and the shattered farmhouse beyond, you see it. The land, though broken, is not dead. There are buds on the tips of brambles, shoots sprouting between cracks in the duckboards, flies gathering not only for flesh, but for flowers. The trench tries to deny it, tries to sink into itself, to drag you with it. But spring does not ask permission. It arrives. You take off your coat for the first time in weeks, just for a moment. The air touches your skin, and it is not cold. You keep the silver spoon in your pocket. You hum, sometimes, though you don't know the tune, just notes, scattered, like petals on a breeze. The trench still steals names, still swallows boots, still stinks of death. But the wind now carries other things too. Sap, soil, sunlight, the memory of bread rising. You cannot say you believe in endings, but you begin, cautiously, to believe in beginnings. Spring means mud, but it also means song. It arrives in the quietest way, a folded slip of hope handed over without ceremony. The sergeant drops it into your lap between patrol shifts, his boots still crusted with the morning's mud. He doesn't look at you, doesn't speak, just moves on to the next name, the next face, the next man still waiting for something from a world that forgot how to write. You stare at the envelope. It's water-stained, crinkled along the edges. The ink has bled slightly where the address was written, but your name remains. Crooked. Familiar. A slant you recognize instantly. Your mother's hand. You do not open it at once. You turn it over, run your fingers along the torn edge. Feel the softness of paper worn by many hands. It smells of oilskin and travel, not lavender or bread or soap, but motion, distance, effort. Henry sees it. He doesn't speak. He just nods once, then looks away. Letters are private currency in the trench. Sacred. Too rare to share. You wait until nightfall. In the dugout, beneath the flickering candle, you unfold it slowly, as if the wrong movement might break it. The paper crackles like dry leaves in autumn. The letter is short, 3 paragraphs. No wasted words. Your mother never wasted anything. She writes of the dog, still alive, still old. She writes of your brother's shoulder, better now, though he still complains when the rain comes. She says the bakery down the street closed, but the smith's daughter is engaged. She wonders if you still hum while you work. She asks, gently, if your boots are dry. You read that line 3 times. Are your boots dry? It is not a question about footwear. It is a question about you, about your soul, your breath, your ability to keep going. You fold the letter again, press it to your chest. For a moment the war fades. The trench is no longer wood and filth and dark, but just a hallway, long and dim, leading back to a kitchen where a fire waits. Later, you read it aloud to yourself, quietly. Then you read it again. You do not show it to the others. But Louis hears you. You know he does. He lies still in his bunk, hands folded on his stomach, eyes closed. When you finish, he says, "You'll need to reply." You nod, but you don't move. The weight of the letter is more than paper. It is tether, proof that you have not been erased, that someone, somewhere, still knows your name, and how it bends in ink. The next day, you find a pencil stub and an old ration label. You begin your response. You do not mention the dead, or the rats, or the time you coughed blood and thought it was the end. You do not tell her about the girl with the red ribbon or the spoon in your pocket. Instead, you write of the birds, of the shoots pushing through the trench walls, of how the mud has changed colour. You tell her, "I am still here." You add, "My boots are wet, but I walk anyway." When you're finished, you fold the page carefully, wrap it in a scrap of dry cloth, and hand it to the runner. He tucks it away without comment. As he turns, you say, "Be gentle with it." He pauses, looks back, nods once. That night, you fall asleep with your mother's letter beneath your pillow. You dream of her voice, not speaking, not even singing, just breathing, steady, safe. In the dream, you are a boy again, and your boots are dry. It happens with no warning. No trumpet, no cry, no sudden flash. Just a stillness that settles so thick and unnatural, it presses against your skin like a second coat. You wake before your shift, blinking into the dark, heart already alert. It takes a moment to notice what's wrong. The guns have stopped. Not a lull, not a pause. Silence. You rise slowly, boots thick with dried clay, ears straining for that familiar thunder, the steady beat of distant shells, the punctuation of machine gun fire, the whispered rattle of death, always approaching from some invisible horizon. But there is nothing. Not even the wind. Louis sits upright in his bunk, eyes wide. He says nothing, but the look he gives you is clear. Do you hear it too? Henry stirs. The others begin to shift, not with panic, not with hope, but with a kind of reverence, as if the trench itself has drawn a breath and now refuses to let it go. You climb to the fire step and peer over the parapet. No flares, no motion, no shapes against the pale morning sky. The fog still clings to the landscape, thin and white, coiling low across the corpse-marked earth. Then you notice the birds. 3 of them, hopping along a twisted strand of barbed wire. Their song is not melodic, more a series of chirps and clicks, but it cuts through the silence like glass through linen. They do not care who watches. Louis joins you. He leans against the boards, lights a cigarette and says, "They'll start again soon." But they don't. Not that day. Not that night. And in the long, aching hours that follow, something unexpected unfolds. The trench breathes. You see it in the way the men walk. Shoulders a little less hunched, steps a little less hurried. Someone sets out to sweep the duckboards clear of mud. Not because it's needed, but because it feels like an act of order. Another begins to hum a lullaby, and this time no one tells him to stop. You sit in the dugout, spoon in hand, turning it slowly between your fingers. The silence is not peaceful. It is weighty, too thick to be comforting. It reminds you of the hours before a storm, a stillness laced with threat, but it's also something else. A question. What if the guns don't start again? What happens then? Henry finds a half-broken harmonica. He plays a note, then another. It sounds awful, rusted and breathy, but you smile. You can't help it. The others laugh, just a little. Louis raises an eyebrow. Henry plays again. The sky remains still. No reply from the other side. No echo of mortar. No retort of rifles. You imagine the enemy sitting in trenches just like yours, silent, confused, wondering if perhaps you've all vanished. That night, you lie awake for hours, waiting for the sound of war to return. It doesn't. Instead, you sleep, fully. deeply. And when the dreams come, they are strange. Not of blood, not of rats or shells or missing limbs. You dream of wheat, of long, golden fields, of walking barefoot, the stalks brushing your legs, the air warm and dry. There are voices too, soft ones, murmuring like wind through orchard trees. You don't understand the words. You don't need to. When you wake, the trench smells of coffee and damp wool, but the silence is still there. You wonder how long it will last. You do not ask aloud, because to speak it might break it. Instead, you watch the sun rise, pale, cloud-veiled, but whole. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like a beginning, not a reprieve, not an illusion, but a moment of stillness so complete, so deafening, that your heart no longer beats to the rhythm of gunfire. It beats to its own, quiet, steady, hopeful. When it came, it did not come with banners. No bugles, no ringing bells, no grand announcement echoed across the fields. There was no hero's welcome, no dramatic pause followed by thunderous relief. There was only the silence, deeper now, wider. A hush so vast it pressed into your chest like the weight of someone leaving the room without saying goodbye. You were cleaning your rifle when the whisper passed through the trench. A runner murmured at first, casually, as if speaking of the weather. "It's over." You looked up. Louis raised an eyebrow. Henry froze mid-step, his boot hovering above the duckboard. "Say that again," someone asked, almost laughing. The runner shrugged. "Word came down. Armistice signed this morning, 6 hours ago. It's over." No one moved. No one cheered. The men stared at each other, unsure whether to speak, unsure if their mouths still knew how. You stood slowly, your legs stiff, your bandages damp. It felt too quiet for celebration, too raw. Then someone dropped a tin cup. The clatter echoed down the line like a shot. The spell broke. Henry sat down hard and began to sob, his shoulders shaking silently, hands covering his face. One man began to laugh, not joyfully, not madly, just a kind of quiet, dry laughter that had nowhere else to go. Another vomited behind the latrine. Louis stood beside you, motionless, the lit end of his cigarette burning down between his fingers. It was over. You climbed the fire step, peered over the trench. No man's land stretched before you, unchanged. Cratered, broken, wire-strewn. No white flags, no flowers, no marching lines of men laying down arms. Just mud and silence. A crow perched on a shattered gun carriage. You stepped down, sat, and realized you didn't know what to do with your hands. The hours passed slowly. Some men dared to stand on the trench lip, staring out across the wreckage. One shouted into the mist, daring anyone to shoot back. No shot came. You sat with your back to the dugout wall, the silver spoon in your palm. You turned it once, twice, then tucked it away again. "You think it's real?" Louis asked. "I don't know," you said. Neither of you spoke again for a long time. By dusk, the trench began to change. Not physically, no one filled in the holes or tore down the wire. But in tone. The men walked slower, stood taller. Someone lit a fire. Someone else sang. Not loud, not proud, just soft. One voice. Then two. Old folk songs. Marching songs twisted into lullabies. Songs of girls in faraway towns, and fruit trees heavy with blossoms. Songs sung only when one has stopped expecting to live and begun learning how to return. You joined in once. Your voice cracked with disuse. No one noticed. The stars came out that night, sharp and clear. You watched them blink into place like candles relit after a long power outage. You tried to count them, lost track, smiled. You thought of your mother, of her kitchen, her garden, her boots by the fire. The men began to speak of home again, not wistfully, not bitterly, but as a place they might actually see. Not a dream, but a station somewhere down the line. A window with frost, a door with a squeak, a room where no one would wake you shouting orders. You do not sleep that night, not because of fear, but because something inside you, something buried long ago, is stirring again. Not joy, but possibility. When dawn comes, the sky is pale lavender, and the frost glistens on the parapet like sugar. You step outside the dugout, alone, and breathe. The war is over. and it sounds like nothing at all. You begin walking before sunrise, before the frost has had time to melt, before the earth remembers it no longer needs to kill you. There is no ceremony, no parade, no orders, just a quiet dismissal, like a whispering voice that says, "Go." So you go. Your pack is lighter now, not because you carry fewer things, but because your body has learned how to carry weight. The silver spoon is tucked into your breast pocket. The letter from your mother, folded and refolded until the creases have begun to tear, rests just over your heart. You walk past the latrine, the cook station, the listening post, past Henry, who still hums softly to himself, seated on a crate with his boots off, staring at nothing, past the dugout where Etienne once coughed through the night. Louis nods to you from the fire step. You nod back. Neither of you say goodbye. The road stretches out like a scar across the landscape, wide, uneven, stitched together with puddles and hoofprints, and the shattered wheels of carts long gone. You step onto it slowly, like entering a river you haven't swum in since childhood. The first village is 6 kilometers away. It takes you longer than it should. Your foot still aches with every step. You limp past broken homes with shutters hanging loose, chimneys hollowed by fire. A boy watches you from behind a fence. You lift a hand. He does not wave back. You sleep that night in a barn, sharing straw with 3 other soldiers, and a dog too old to bark. The roof leaks. The dog snores. One of the men tells a story about a vineyard he used to steal from as a boy. You don't speak, but you listen. And, in the morning, you continue. You pass through fields, greening with the promise of spring, past orchards that bloom too early, their blossoms like ghosts clinging to black branches. The air smells different now, not of rot or powder, but of life trying to return to itself. It is overwhelming. Sometimes you cry, and don't know why. Sometimes you laugh, and don't know what's funny. And sometimes you just walk. One day, you stop in a town where no one meets your eyes. A girl sweeps her front steps, her sleeves roll to the elbow. She glances at your boots, your coat, your eyes, then returns to her broom. You do not blame her. In another village, an old man offers you bread and wine. He does not ask for your story. He tells you his instead, about the time the Prussians came through, about his son, about the dog that wouldn't leave the cellar. You thank him, and the thanks feels strange in your mouth, like a forgotten word rediscovered. Weeks pass. Your uniform frays. Your beard grows. The war peels from you in pieces, not all at once. You still wake with your hands curled into fists, still flinch at loud noises, still reach for your rifle in the dark, but your dreams begin to change. You dream of rivers, of shirts drying on a line, of candles that never go out. One morning, after days of walking, you see the curve of a hill you remember, the bend in a path, the rusted gate, home. Your feet stop. Your breath catches. You walk slowly now, not from pain, but from awe. The garden is smaller than you recall. The door still creaks. A single chicken pecks near the step. You raise your hand to knock, then stop. And before you can move, the door opens. She stands there, older, thinner, hair threaded with grey. Your mother. She looks at you, eyes widening, mouth opening. Not in a cry, not in a gasp, just breath, deep, trembling. She steps forward. You do not speak. She wraps her arms around you, pulls you in, presses her hand to the back of your head like she did when you were 5 and feverish. And in that silence, warmer than any word, you understand. You are not the same. You never will be. But you are home. And the silence here does not threaten. It welcomes. Time does not erase the trench. It softens the edges, perhaps, covers it with ivy, folds it gently into memory. But it does not remove it. The trench remains not in the earth, but in you, a shape beneath your skin, a shadow in your blood. It does not announce itself. It lingers, silent, waiting. You return to life, as they call it. You wake to the smell of coffee. You learn to tie your boots without shivering. You relearn the names of things. Fork, chair, window, laughter. You sit in sunlit rooms, listen to the ticking of clocks, press your palm against warm stone, and remind yourself that you are here, not there, not anymore. You marry. A quiet woman, with eyes like a sky before rain. She never asks for stories. She touches your arm gently when your breath comes short in sleep. She places her hand over yours when your fingers tremble at the sound of thunder. You become a teacher. Children laugh in your classroom, draw birds with crooked wings, ask you questions you cannot answer. You tell them what you know, how to read a map, how to write a letter, how to listen. Sometimes, in the middle of a lesson, a scent, old wood, damp earth, will find you, and you'll lose your voice. You'll grip the edge of the desk until the air settles again. You never explain. How could you? The trench is not a story. It is a landscape folded into your marrow. Years pass. You grow older. The pain in your leg returns with each season. A phantom echo of that frost-bitten winter. You never complain. Instead, you walk slowly, carefully, as though each step carries weight beyond bone. You keep certain things close. The spoon, dulled with age. The letter, its folds worn thin. The name of the man who forgot his own. The girl with the red ribbon. Sometimes you sit in the cellar at night, the stone cold beneath you, and press your palm flat against the wall. You close your eyes, and there it is. Not in sound. But in pressure. The trench. You do not fear it. You speak to it now, gently, like an old friend you no longer resent. I remember, you whisper. But I'm still here. You plant a garden. Tomatoes. Beans. Sunflowers. You dig with your hands. Press seeds into the soil with reverence. The dirt clings to your skin, dark and wet, and for a moment, it feels the same, like the mud of the trench. But then a breeze comes, and birdsong, and your wife's voice from the window. And you remember. This is different. This earth gives. You do not forget the trench. You learn to live beside it. You carry it like a scar. Not always visible, but always felt. When someone asks where you were during the war, you answer carefully. You do not speak of battles, or medals, or ranks. You speak of the mud, the waiting, the whisper of rain against wood, the silence after the guns stopped. The trench beneath your skin is not a wound anymore. It is a map. It leads you here, to this moment, this life, this breath. And though you walk through orchards now, sleep in a bed with warm sheets, wake to the smell of bread and morning light, the earth you left behind still walks beside you, quiet, constant. The boy sits at your feet, legs crossed, eyes wide. He is young, your grandson, full of the energy and restlessness you remember having once, before the world tilted sideways and stayed that way. He clutches a wooden soldier in his fist, its paint chipped, its bayonet long since snapped off. The firelight flickers across his face, and he looks at you as though the world itself is waiting behind your tongue. Tell me, he says. You hesitate. It's late. The sky outside has darkened into velvet. The coals sigh gently in the hearth. Your cane rests against your knee. Your fingers, now crooked with age, drift to the drawer beside your chair. You open it. Inside are three things. A spoon, silver, bent, its crest worn smooth by time and touch. A letter, yellowed, fragile, edges curling like old leaves. And a small wooden tag, the kind once tied to the wrists of the dead, with a name scrawled in faded ink. Not yours. You lay them on the table. He leans forward. You do not speak of glory. You do not speak of flags, or medals, or victory. You speak of mud, of cold, so deep it crept into your dreams, of rain that whispered through your coat, of rats that stared with knowing eyes. You speak of a trench dug into a foreign field, where names were lost and silence grew like moss. You tell him about the boy who sang in his sleep and never woke, about the man who carved your name when he could no longer remember his own, about the girl with the red ribbon and the way she didn't cry. He listens, his toy soldier forgotten. You place the spoon in his hands. This belonged to someone who believed he would return. You place the letter in his lap. This came when I'd stopped believing I would. You point to the tag, and this name is one I carry now, because he couldn't anymore. The boy is quiet. You can see the questions rising in him. How did you survive? What did it feel like? Were you afraid? But none of them come out. Not yet. Instead, he reaches up and places his small hand over yours. You cover it gently. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the distance a church bell rings. Not the bell of morning or alarm, but of time, of hours passing, of days turning quietly toward dusk. You do not tell him everything. Some things are meant to be held in the marrow, passed down not in words but in the silence between them. But you give him this, that you lived, that you returned. That the trench took something from you, a piece of your voice perhaps, or the way you once believed in endings. But it did not take your soul. You rose from it. You built a life from the mud. You buried the war not in forgetting, but in remembering gently. As the fire dims, he rests his head against your knee. You do not move. You watch the shadows lengthen across the room, and listen to the quiet, the kind that once came only after the shelling stopped. But now, it is a different silence, a peaceful one. You whisper the name on the tag, not for the boy to hear, but for the man it belonged to. And in that moment, with a spoon in your pocket, a letter near your heart, and a child asleep beside you, you know you did not walk out of the war alone. You carried others with you. And now, at last, you've set them down. Home. As the last embers fade from this forgotten story, I hope it leaves a glow in your own heart. Subscribe if you wish to walk again through the silent pages of history. What part of this journey stayed with you the most? As the last echoes fade into the sodden earth of memory, may this story rest softly beside you tonight. If it stirred something quiet within your chest, subscribe and return. We'll walk again through the trenches, the fields, and the forgotten hours of history. What part of this journey stayed with you the most? Could you have survived a winter in the trenches? Have you ever held a memory that refused to fade, like mud on the soul?